Hello everyone, I'm John Eggins. This is PNG Tonight. In this edition, we talk to the Minister for National Planning and Monitoring, Charles Abel. He takes us through the importance of sound planning, how that ensures effective service delivery and implemented correctly reduces the cost of providing services. Putting it all together, the Minister is set to take to Parliament a new Planning Act in the coming session. I talked to Mr. Abel. Thank you, Minister, for coming on to PNG Tonight. Your first time on our program, sir.
Yes, John. Thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Okay. Sir, you are a minister of a very important portfolio, one of three economic key portfolios in Papua New Guinea, planning. Everything else will go smoothly, will fall in place if planning is right. How has planning been? Tell us where you are, how you've come, where you are, and where you're going.
Thank you, John. Yes, look, it's a long story, and I know I gave a long interview the other night on MTV about it as well. And
okay. Oh, that was
the first thing I always say is that plans are vital, plans are critical, but I don't want people to think that we spend all our time making useless plans that we then put on the shelf and do other things. And so I want to emphasize that people like myself and of course Prime Minister and other members of Parliament spend probably most of our time attempting at least to do things, attempting to be people of action. And for example, I go home every week. I'll be going home tomorrow to my district of Alatau, and I will spend all weekend, because we work 7 days a week, concentrating on delivering the fundamental goods and services to our people. And I spend my time on such things as fixing potholes, footpaths, all the way to the main highways to connect Alatau to Raba Raba and Alatau to Fife Bay and all the way up to Maka Maka, and putting all the jetties in place and making sure all the aid posts are fixed. And this is where we probably spend most of our time. But it is so important that right down to ward level, district level, provincial level, and of course, very importantly, at national level, we have a clear planning framework and structure that one, gets the plans right, and then two, make sure that everyone is coordinating and working and implementing those same plans. And we also, very importantly, and this is the big missing link, we're reporting and providing the data to follow up what is happening in terms of the implementation of those plans.
Okay.
So, the last 4 years at planning, we have begun a process which has started off with the publishing of the STARS document, the Papua New Guinea National Strategy for Responsible Sustainable Development. It has also led to the publishing of the Medium-Term Development Plan number 2. And I hope that in the next session of Parliament, which is this month, March, to bring the National Planning Responsibility Act, which will create in law a planning framework. It will create a national service delivery framework, and it will create a monitoring and evaluation framework that ties everything back to a clear set of indicators and creates a reporting system that systematically produces timely results against, in particular, the MTDP. But the MTDP indicators incorporate such things that we'll talk about later, like the MDG goals, Millennium Development Goals incorporated. Things like Human Development Index have to be captured in there, and other international indicators. But it's also customized to our general goals and our specific goals. So we have been working very hard, apart from building our highways and hospitals and trying to implement our budgets. And as you know, apart from the important daily task of those things at that level, nationally as well, dealing with the day-to-day issues of making sure that this government delivers its commitments and promises, and our budgets, for example, are dealt with, our public servants are getting paid, our nurses and hospitals are there, and medicines are in place, and so on. We also, obviously, these take priority. But if you have proper plans in place and you are conducting yourself according to clear principles, which are in our Constitution, what you'll find is that many of the day-to-day fires that we are putting out on a day-to-day basis will be avoided if the plans are properly structured and followed in the first place. Classic example is the continual reliance on extractive industry and the fact that 70% of our exports are raw, mineral, gold, petroleum-based products. And that tends to leave us in a situation where we are always subject to the commodity cycle as we find ourselves in today. Classic example is climate change. Acknowledging climate change, it is also impacting upon us every day. And how do we start to respond to that? Not only to adapt to the effects of it, but to respond to the international community that are looking for solutions. If we have a proper plan, we will see such things as our forest, the tuna, water, biodiversity in a different light, and we will start to perhaps stop repeating the mistakes we are doing, which is a very short-term driven development cycle we are following, which is based too much on trying to feed ourselves today and forgetting about developing a long-term sustainable economy. And things like climate change are trying to tell us a story, I keep saying.
Yeah.
So the planning process you talk about is trying to get the overarching plans correct. We have got a wonderful constitution. Everything is in the guiding and directive principles. We've tried to publish a document called STARS, I mentioned, that elevates some of those principles. So we start to see about integral human development is so important. We start to recognize the value of our natural environment. We start to talk about equality and participation. We start to talk about Papua New Guinea ways. They will give us the basis to then begin a process of structuring our plans a bit better. They're a bit more long-term and sustainable. After the STARS, as I said, we then produced the MTDP2, which aligns the political cycle, the 5-year political cycle, to the development plan. There has been this disjointedness because the MTDPs, the 5-year plans, have been finishing in the middle of the parliamentary cycle. So when a government comes in, they may not necessarily subscribe and support that plan fully because it's been published by the previous government. Mm-hmm. So we have an MTDP, but that MTDP is still linked to the Constitution through this planning framework. After that, we make sure that the MTDP, the 5-year plan, is linked to the annual budget process. And this is where the planning act comes in. It makes sure there is that connection, underlying connection there, that this has been one of the issues of the past. Much of the budget formulation is just, it's too ad hoc. It's not necessarily connected to a long-term path. You're not compelled to. We will pay lip service to the long-term plans in the Constitution, but in the annual budget process, it's more like a bidding process, and it tends to be a little bit all over the place. And what you find is we tend to continue to repeat making mistakes. So it's important to get that planning framework in place, which doesn't necessarily legislate particular plans, but it just legislates a framework to follow that provides these linkages. So that every government comes in as a 5-year plan, that 5-year plan is connected to the Constitution, that 5-year plan is then connected to the annual budgetary process.
Okay.
Then it leads on to the other frameworks that I will talk about. So this is the process we've been working very hard on, and we want to bring the Planning Responsibility Act to Parliament to capture these things into legislation.